Last week, I introduced you to 1965's Frankenstein Conquers the World, in which the Frankenstein monster's immortal heart is shipped to World War II-era Japan, where the atomic bombing of Hiroshima causes it to regenerate the monster in giant size. After rampaging through the countryside and doing battle with the evil dinosaur Baragon, Frankenstein met his end in the form of a sudden, unexplained earthquake, or in an alternate version, an even more sudden, equally unexplained giant octopus. The end? Of course not, it's a monster movie, and besides, the entire plot hinged on Frankenstein's Wolverine-level healing factor. The story picks back up 1 year later in Frankenstein no Kaiju Sandatai Gaira, which is literally translated as Frankenstein's Monsters Sanda vs. Gaira in English. But since this one didn't get released in the US until 5 years after it had been made, and 6 years after its predecessor had been largely forgotten by most Western moviegoers, although it was such a massive hit in Germany that German translators just started calling every Japanese monster movie Frankenstein after that, it was redubbed to remove references to the original film and given yet another gloriously overblown title:
War of the Gargantuas.
As our story opens, a Japanese fishing vessel is attacked by, yep, that same damn giant octopus again. Hell, they built it, they're gonna film it. The octopus, however, is quickly defeated when Gaira, who's basically a gigantic green Sasquatch, bursts up out of the ocean and beats it up, only to then turn around and sink the ship himself. This is another part of the running subtext of Japanese giant monster or kaiju movies from this era. The monsters fight each other, but they often regard the humans in the middle of their battles either indifferently or with hostility. Some have speculated that this is partially representative of Japan's uneasy view of its own place in the post-war, post-imperial era, a small nation perpetually swept up in the Cold War clash of rising superpowers like Russia, China, and the United States. Anyway, the idea with Gaira is that some of whatever radioactive blood and cell tissue was left of the nigh-immortal Frankenstein monster from the previous movie has regenerated itself into a whole new creature. Except while Frankenstein was basically a misunderstood monster, Gaira is a nasty son of a gun who sets out destroying Japan and eating people pretty much the minute he gets to the mainland. Fortunately, by 1966, the Japanese Defense Forces had gotten pretty good at fighting off giant monsters. Unfortunately, it turns out that there's actually two of these things. The brown one is called Sanda, and once he's pulled his green brother out of harm's way, things start to get complicated. We meet some scientists who claim they'd actually discovered and studied Sanda as a baby, but released him into the wild when he turned out not to be hostile to humans. In any other context, the idea that they either didn't tell anyone about this, or that they did and nobody really cared wouldn't make much sense. But since Baragon from the previous movie turned up in Godzilla movies later on, you kinda have to assume that this is happening in a universe where this sort of thing was happening in Japan every other week. In any case, Sanda, who, just so we're clear, also spawned from the remains of Frankenstein, is just looking to get him and his brother to safety, and since humans were nice to him back when, he doesn't want to hurt them either. He's the can't we all just get along monster. Gaira, on the other hand, really is just kind of a bastard, and when Sanda comes back to their campsite and finds out he's been eating people, they find themselves at something of an ethical impasse on the subject of peaceful coexistence versus predatory survivalism. But since the movie isn't called Polite Disagreement of the Gargantuas, said disagreement just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's time for yet another unexplained natural disaster, in this case an offshore volcanic eruption, to once again settle the fight in a draw. You know, it's sometimes easy for Toho's giant monster movies to blend together in one's mind, but several small details have helped War of the Gargantuas stand out as one of the cult classics of the genre. Aside from Frankenstein himself, who was more of an actor in makeup than a full-blown man-in-suit monster, Sanda and Gaira are the only Toho kaiju who have visible human eyes, allowing their actors to show a far greater range of expression that really adds to the already surreal effect of ostensibly human-shaped beings blown up to giant size. Also, and we're getting into some serious special effects geek territory here, the Gargantuas are only supposed to be about 98 feet tall, which is puny compared to Godzilla or Ghidorah, who are often said as being hundreds of feet tall. As such, the miniature buildings in this movie had to be a lot bigger and thus a lot more detailed than usual. As a result, the sets, and especially the city destruction portions, are some of the most striking that Toho ever put to film. This movie was out of print for a long time, but it was recently released on a double bill DVD with another classic Rodan, and is well worth scooping up. Alright, 2 weeks down, 3 to go. Next week, Schlocktober comes back to America, and I show you what might happen if Beatrix Potter and Roland Emmerich made a baby. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.